Welcome back to Our Community. Susie Thomas visiting with Jacob Masters. He is Director of Museums and talking today about historic Schönbrunn Village. Before we get into the story of Trumpet in the Land, you mentioned that recently 250 school children toured, and you were talking about all the events that school children get to do. When I think of children these days and how techno-savvy they are, how do they respond to dipping candles?
It's actually very well. I'm surprised. They really like it. You know, they have never seen or done things like this before, so it's astounding to them. You know, they also love to grind corn. You know, they don't realize that you can't just go to, you know, at that time you couldn't go to Walmart and buy a bag of flour or a bag of sugar. You couldn't do that. And it's mind-boggling to them, yes. You know. So I mean, for us as, you know, educators at the museum, we really like to see that, you know, because like you said, you know, they're all tech savvy. They all have their phones out. They're all taking pictures of stuff, and it's like, put the phones away. You know, this is learning in its best form, and you know they get to churn butter too, so they got to see how butter's made. Again, you're not going to Target and getting butter, you know. So I mean, they respond very well to it. I'm always very shocked.
That's so cool. Yeah. A big movement right now is the tiny house movement. Mm-hmm. And when I see those, I think of Schönbrunn Village. And how large were the families that lived in these small cabins? You know,
it varied. You know, there were some that were, you know, there was David Zeisberger, who actually was never married in the village. So he lived in a cabin by himself. So he had a whole cabin to himself. That'd probably been perfect. But, you know, we have other cabins that we know that, you know, there were 6 people living in it. Like, how could you fit 6 people in there?
How many rooms?
There were 2. That's it. You know, there is one in particular. There's a loft in one of them where, you know, that's where they would have slept, and everybody else would have been in the living part would have been on the main floor. You know, it's astounding how they were able to do so much with so little and so little space. And of course, you know, you didn't really spend a lot of time in your cabin either at that time. You know, you were outside working in the cornfields or getting water or going to school or going to church, or, you know, a lot of times they would even sew outside because it was much brighter outside, so you could see better. So,
what an interesting point, that they weren't cocooning like we tend to do now.
Yeah, exactly.
They were really, that home was a place to hang your hat.
Yeah.
And then everything else was down. They actually had much larger living rooms because their living room would have been the field or whatever, outside. Very interesting. All right. Can you give us a little bit of an audio tour? Pretend we've just arrived and take us some of the highlights and cabins that we'll see around the village.
Well, like I said, at the beginning, you would start at the gift shop, and you know there's a video, an orientation video that kind of just tells you a little bit about the history, and there's also a museum. You have, you know, very cool artifacts in there. The coolest artifact that we have at Schönbrunn is the Schönbrunn bell, school bell. It is the original school bell from the 1770s. So that is in the museum. You can look at that. It's phenomenal. Like, it's amazing to me that you can still see that it's that old and we have it. It's just amazing. So you walk out into the village, and my favorite thing I like to do is, and I tell all my tours this, especially with adults, kids not so much, but with adults, I tell them, turn off your cell phones because it's time to be peaceful. Listen to the sounds. You know, obviously there's 250, which is right next to us, which is kind of loud, and then there's also an airport right next to Schönbrunn. So sometimes the airplanes will fly overhead, but
cars and planes kind of put you back into reality again. Otherwise, you really have been transported to the 1700s as if.
Yes. So, you know, I tell everyone to close their eyes for just a minute. Just listen to the sounds of nature. You know, a lot of times, you know, when we're opening up the cabins, you'll see like a deer run past. I mean, that happens all the time. So it really is, you get in tune with nature, get in tune with the village and the history. So as you're walking through, you know, we have, you know, all of these buildings, again, are not the original, but they're all on their original sites. We know that they're on their original sites. So, you know, this was the site of the first school, the site of the first church, the site of the first code of laws, and the first Christian cemetery in the state of Ohio. I mean, a lot of people forget that, you know, this is the first site of all of these things. And so you get to see that. You get to see this school. And, you know, it's a big one-room schoolhouse. That's what it is. I mean, but definitely take a look at it. And there's 2 doors. And this is an interesting thing. There's actually 2 doors. And that's one of the questions that we always ask people. What do you think the 2 doors were for? Well, men and women. Men would go in one. Women would go in the other.
Really?
And it was, David Zeisberger was way ahead of his time because he thought women should be educated just as much as men should. So when you were in school, you would have to learn arithmetic. You'd have to learn, you know, the first time the Delaware ever saw their language written was because of David Zeisberger. Obviously, it's phonetic to English and German, but the first time they ever saw it written was by him. So you would have to learn how to speak Delaware, or you have to write Delaware, write English, and write German. You'd have to know that in school. So, and again, everybody went to school. If you weren't familiar with English yet and you were 60 years old, you have to go to school too, just with little kids.
So we know that David Zeisberger had this amazing community going, and here's these peaceful people minding their own business.
Yes.
And now tell us the story of what happened to them next.
Okay, so after, the village was founded in 1772. They left in 1777.
Now, why did they leave?
Well, the reason they left is because this was the height of the American Revolution at this time, and although the Moravians were pacifists, they said that all the time that we really don't care. Their loyalties did lie with the colonists, but again, they were pacifists. But the problem was they were stationed between Fort Pitt and Fort Detroit. In between both, and because of that, one was, the colonists, one was the British. The British thought that it's those people in the Tuscarawas Valley, they're the ones that are causing all these problems, and then the colonists thought, well, it's those people in Tuscarawas Valley, they're causing all these problems, and so it was bad because they thought both sides were working, against them. And
they
of course,
were being blamed for being on the other side.
Yeah, pretty much. And again, they weren't on either side technically,
Yes.
although again, like I said, they did lie with the loyalists a little bit.
But they just were rooting for them,
Yes,
not
exactly.
fighting with
Exactly,
them.
exactly, because they did not fight. Actually, there were 18 codes of laws, and then they added a 19th one when the American Revolution started, and that was, we will not take anything in war because of the American Revolution. So fast forward a couple years, David Zeisberger was actually taken to be tried for treason. Him and his cohorts were all taken to be tried for treason. And while that was happening, they had all of the Moravians had left the Tuscarawas Valley and had moved north to Sandusky. And so they actually came back because they had corn crops and all this stuff. So when they were coming back, they actually they were residing in Jenaton, which is not far from Schönbrunn. It's a little south of Schönbrunn.
Now, you have said that the cool way.
Yes.
is Jenaton Hutton or Hooten?
It's actually pronounced Gnadenhutten.
Gnadenhutten.
Yes.
Or Jenaton Hutton.
Jenaton Hutton. Yeah. The English pronunciation is Jenaton Hutton. The actual German pronunciation is Gnadenhutten, and it means tents or huts of grace.
Or if you're Jacob Masters, you just say Jenaton, and everybody knows what you're talking
that's
about.
the local pronunciation, because it's such a long word to say.
I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're fine.
Take it from
you're
there.
Fine. So as they were coming back, there was an incident that happened previously where innocent women and children were actually mutilated, and it was a very bad situation, and it was actually done by Delaware natives, but it wasn't the Moravian Delaware natives. It was done by savages who had not been converted yet, and they were warlike. So there was a huge misunderstanding in this instance, and the militia, who were the ones who found this mutilation, found the peaceful Delawares and assumed it was them.
And blamed them. These people who would not harm a fly.
Exactly. So what happened, one day in particular, they locked them all into the church and said, "We're going to kill you the next morning." And they took them out the next morning, one by one, and beat them to death with a mallet.
And this is all portrayed in Trumpet in the Land.
Yes.
Now, I'm still trying to understand. They were... Who was it that took them and killed the Moravian Indians?
It was a militia group.
The militia group.
Yeah.
But they were doing what they were accusing these people of having done.
Exactly. So it was kind of like a revenge tactic. So, and it was very brutal. It was over 90 men, women, and children were massacred at Jenaton Hutton.
So where are they buried now? In Jenaton?
They're buried in Jenaton Hutton, yes.
And we know that these are the people from Schönbrunn.
Yes. Some of them are, some of them weren't. Okay. It wasn't all people from Schönbrunn. It could have been a combination. There were multiple, Coshocton had one, Lake Tenau had one. All of these different places actually had multiple Moravian missions, but a lot of them were from Schönbrunn, yes.
How do we know this? Was this written somewhere? Was this recorded? Or how do we know the details?
after it had happened, David Zeisberger was the one who found out about it. And, after he was done with his trials and he was acquitted, he didn't actually get in trouble for, being a conspirator. He was the one who found out about it and wrote it down. So
that was my very next question. What was his fate?
He was fine. Obviously he survived all that. He lived until his, I think, 80s or 90s. I mean, he was old, and he actually didn't get married until he was 60. When everyone's like, you need to get married now. It was much, much later in time, and she was actually, I think, like 20 when they actually got married.
Wow.
So yeah.
How interesting. Did he have children? Do we know?
That, I don't know if it was ever written. I think it was too late for him, from what I understand, but I could be wrong. I'm not sure on that. I have to find that out.
Interesting man. And did he ever work more with any other tribes and introduce the Moravian faith to other tribes?
Not really. It was mostly just the Delaware. But he continued his missionary work until the day he died. I do know that. But it was mostly with the Delaware. That was the group he really liked to work with.
So if you'd like to see this story acted out, describe the scenery and the theater that is this outdoor theater that you get to see this in. Tell us a little bit about that.
So it is an outdoor theater. So obviously very weather dependent, but it's a very cool place because the backdrop is like outside. So they use like rocks and like the actual topography of the area as their backdrop, which is beautiful. I mean, it's just, we're so lucky in this state. We have such a beautiful, especially on this side of the state, it's just beautiful on this side. So, but that's the backdrop. It is literally like it is the woods of Schönbrunn, like the cabins and everything. I mean, obviously it's not at Schönbrunn, it's away from it, but the trees are there and it's literally the backdrop. It's perfect.
Okay. And, so you said it's weather dependent, but they act out Trumpet in the Land, this entire story of David Zeisberger and the Moravian Indians. There.
Yep, it's the whole story.
It's a musical, is it not?
No, it's not. This one's not a musical. They do musicals. They every year they do a musical at Trumpet, but there's no music, and I mean there is a little bit, but it's not like a lot of
singing.
Yeah, it's more like the Moravians singing as part of the story.
I remember hearing singing. So
yes.
Okay, so it's more of a drama.
Yeah, it's more of a drama.
You wouldn't call it a musical.
No.
Live horses and the works.
Oh yeah, everything. I mean, it's the retelling of David Zeisberger as he's founding Schönbrunn, and then the aftermath, and then Janaten.
For anybody who's hearing about this for the first time, tell us, how do you get tickets for this?
Well, you can actually call Trumpet. They also have a website, or you can call our local Convention Visitors Bureau, the Tuscarawas County CVB, and they have all the information as well. So,
and this this outdoor theater is located where?
It's actually not far from Schönbrunn. I'm not sure the exact location, but if you know where Kent State Tusk is, it's like right across the street.
Okay, there you
go.
So
that's the best description I can give you. It's really close to Buckeye Joint Vocational School as well. So.
Jacob, this is all so interesting, and you must absolutely love your job.
I do.
And what stands out for you as just a highlight of these people or anything about it, or getting to do what you do every day? What do you love the most?
There's a couple things. I would say my favorite thing is I keep coming back to this, but it's the truth. It's so peaceful and quiet there. You walk in and you hear the birds. You hear the bees buzzing, and it's so magical. It's so peaceful and quiet and just relaxing. There's no longer a spring there. It dried up years ago, but the magic and the story and the history is still there. You can still, hear it as you're walking through the village. That I love that. And then my second favorite thing is probably watching families come in and their, kids light up when they get to go to the church, or they get to go to the one cabin and they learn how to make butter. I mean, it's amazing the looks on their faces when they get so excited that, they just churn butter for like an hour and then they get to actually taste it. Like, it's not like, unfolding it out of the package and, eating it. It's literally making it right there. It's a totally cool experience.
Wonderful experience for families. A historic Schönbrunn village. Jacob Masters, thank you so much for what you bring to our community.
Thank you.